Hello, this is Dr. Tom Groover. I'm here with Michelle Sanborn of the New Hampshire Community Rights Network and a state organizer for the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. I'm here in Colorado, member of the National Community Rights Network, the Colorado Community Rights Network, and East Boulder County United of Lafayette, Colorado, where we currently are doing community rights organizing locally and state, where I'm involved with local and statewide and national community rights organizing. So now we need to have a little explanation of what community rights organizing is and talk about Michelle's role there in New Hampshire. Michelle, what is community rights organizing?
It's very much about protecting and expanding the rights of people and communities as well as their natural environments. Very different from the regulatory process, which is more about deciding how much and where harm is going to be permitted. Quite often, those harmful activities are regulated, permitted by state agencies. These are most often what I would consider private interest corporate business endeavors. So the difference is that the community rights organizing is about helping to educate people to understand the difference between organizing from a rights-based perspective, protecting their ability to speak not only on behalf of their individual fundamental rights, but on behalf of their community and their natural environments.
Good. Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the mechanisms we use for doing that, okay? I know that in New Hampshire, the history of community rights organizing is much bigger than it is out here in Colorado. We've just been doing this for a few years. How many years has this been going on in New Hampshire, do you think?
This has been going on for a little over 10 years now.
Okay.
So
And
this started in 2006 in the community of Barnstead. Gail Darrow put forth a water rights ordinance to protect the town's water. And that was in response to another community, a neighboring community that was going through a large groundwater withdrawal process by a corporate entity that was in essence seeking to draw the same amount of domestic water that was being consumed, which if you do the math, leaves the community with no water,
right.
no water whatsoever. And that was permitted. And so after watching another community go through that process, she said that there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to say no. There's got to be a way to not spend all this money in the regulatory hearings, in the court system. There has to be a way. And so through her determination, she learned about Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund and decided to put forth a water rights ordinance for her community. And that really started the process. It made such an impression on her and her community that she began to share that information and what they did in their town with others.
Yeah. Just so the audience can get a little bit more information, Gail then became very successful sharing this information.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed getting to know her. Excuse me, I'm going to break up here. 'Cause,
Well,
yeah,
I'll interject because this
yeah,
is actually today happens to be the 1 year anniversary of her passing,
yeah,
and she has been sorely missed. She's an amazing woman, very bold, and didn't take anything lying down. You know, just had an amazing way with people, and could very much make you think about why you think the way you think, and how that kind of propaganda and colonizing of the mind is so detrimental. You know, not only to yourself, but your community and the environment, and how that approach, that colonizing of the mind, is so unsustainable.
right.
Amazing woman.
Yeah. I took a democracy school in 2012 here in Lyons, Colorado, and the teachers were Gail and Ben Price.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I don't think I could have gotten that out on my own. And so The thing is that this action of creating ordinances, I mean, this was something that was replicated in many communities for many different, you know, to protect communities from many different corporate harms. Can you just kind of give us a overview, just kind of a summary of what that looks like there in New Hampshire?
Yes, there's actually quite a few. There have been concerns regarding the spreading of human waste as fertilizer, sludge spreading. There have been concerns regarding GMOs, free and fair elections. We've also had the large groundwater withdrawal, industrial wind turbine projects, energy transmission line projects, and now we also have fracked gas pipeline projects. So a number of different issues that have been concerns. I would say that the major ones over the last 5 to 6 years in particular have been energy related.
Right. And can you clarify the difference between adopting, you know, green energy and these industrial, you know, wind farms? I mean, I've heard some outrageous things that it's just kind of hard to imagine, you know, from here.
Well, one of the phrases that's often used here is not clean, not green, not cheap, in reference to industrial wind in particular. My own community, I personally led the effort in passing a rights-based ordinance both in 2014 and in 2015 because our area has been targeted for industrial wind projects. And within a 15-mile radius, they were between 4 different projects. We're planning to place 125 more than 500-foot tall turbines on ridge lines that surround a pristine watershed, lake, very tourist-dependent area. So this would affect not only our health because of the negative health impacts of industrial wind turbines, but also our local economics. People come here to get away from industry. They don't come here to to listen to it, to feel it, and to see it. So there were a number of different reasons why our community and surrounding communities decided that we didn't feel that that was sustainable, viable, you know, protecting for our health, safety, or welfare. And so we passed rights-based ordinances to prohibit such activities.
Yeah. I mean, what I heard was that the plan, the way they would do these wind turbine installations was to scrape off the top of the mountain, which means that
a lot of blasting.
Blast off the top of the mountain. Yeah, that seems to be the favorite thing, is that if you have a mountaintop, you blast it off for some commercial purpose. A lot of mining happens that way. And then they have to build this, you know, access road probably, and they have to cut, you know, around the trees all around there, and then build this huge tower, and so you'll be surrounded by towers with blades which are spinning around. And how close to people's homes would this occur? Are there some places where it'd be really close?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the studies that have been done, which of course are not funded by the industry or the government, show that anything within definitely a 3-mile radius is a serious impact, and even up to 10 miles or more, depending on the terrain and what direction the wind is blowing. So, and also how old the turbines are, because it's a machine and there's wear and tear, and so that can increase the noise volume and the vibration. Some of these projects would be located, I would say, within a quarter to a half a mile of homes. It's not long distance by any means. I want to say that the manufacturer requirement is possibly 3 times the height of the turbine. So if a turbine is approximately 500 feet, which is what they were proposing here, 1,500 feet is the regulation distance for siting a turbine to a residence or any other structure.
Yeah, we don't want to go down the turbine rabbit hole right now. I just wanted to make that clear because we do have people in Colorado who are concerned that establishing the right to local community self-government means that local communities could refuse to adopt renewable energy projects in their area. And what you're describing doesn't sound all that desirable. It doesn't sound that renewable either.
No, and here's one of the clarifying differences is that an industrial project that is being run and dictated, owned by a corporate developer is a different animal altogether than a community operated and controlled energy resource. So we have biomass plants here, we have local hydro power plants here. We have a number of what I would consider truly renewable energy resources. And the sad thing is that we're not really able to locally control those energy sources. That's what ultimately defines the difference, is that there is no local control over these energy sources, especially when you're talking about a for-profit industrial project, whether that be industrial wind, hydropower from Canada, fracked gas from the Pennsylvania Marcellus Shale. Any of those projects, they are not locally controlled. And that's the defining difference between what is considered sustainable,
Right.
Renewable,
Yeah.
in the sense that the community can determine whether that source is a viable renewable source, depending on what is available within their community.
Good. Thank you very much for that. That's very much appreciated. So, what we have then is the history of people in local communities writing their own laws to protect their health, safety, and welfare from corporate harm, basically,
Absolutely.
right? And I, since we've done these here in Colorado, we've done one that was elected actually here in Colorado, in Lafayette, Colorado. I have a lot of experience with that. But basically, it's a document. It starts out as a document. Here, it's an amendment to a community charter. So it's an amendment to a little constitution for the city of Lafayette. And what it does is it enumerates the rights that are being legally claimed by the community. Now, these rights in community organizing are inalienable rights, fundamental rights that deserve the highest level of legal protection in the first place. And according to our Constitution here, we have the right to do this. So we amended the Constitution by circulating a petition, getting the thing elected by 61% of the vote. It was enacted as law. So we clarified our rights to clean air and clean water and freedom from chemical trespass, the right to peaceful enjoyment of our homes, the right to local community self-government, and the right to create prohibitions for harmful corporate projects which violate those rights. And then included in that document is a prohibition on the fracking of Lafayette, Colorado. Mm-hmm. And Lafayette's right in the bullseye, of fracking. It's being surrounded by fracking wells. And so, it was adopted, and it's a powerful law. It's local community self-government. It's fulfilling the vision of the Colorado Constitution.
Yes, and that's a very similar process here. At the local level, we have what are called town meetings in New Hampshire, very pertinent to all of New England states. And New Hampshire is extremely independent. I mean, we established the first state constitution,
Right.
It wasn't put forth to the people in 1776, but it was in 1784. But nonetheless, a very strong sense of independence. And much of our Constitution and the Bill of Rights does reflect the Declaration of Independence and the rights that were felt to be inalienable and inherent. And of course, there's more than that. They felt that the majority of those didn't need to be explicitly defined because they were understood.
Right.
And,
they were practiced.
Exactly, they were practiced. So it's an interesting process in New Hampshire to go through town meeting. We have what are called selectmen, which might be comparable to, we also have city council for cities. And those selectmen are responsible for putting forth a warrant. And a warrant is simply an agenda for town meeting. And in New Hampshire, any 25 residents can petition for what is called a petition warrant article. and that cannot be refused by law. So that gets placed onto the warrant. And this is primarily how local communities in New Hampshire have put forth these local laws to be able to put it forth at town meeting. And so then it's a very democratic process for the members of the community to be able to vote on it, to understand what it is, to have their say, ask their questions. It's a very open forum, and hence, pass their vote as to whether or not they feel that this is something that they want for their community. And it's a great process. It's probably one of the truest forms of democracy left.
Yeah, that would be really unusual to have that experience here. Here in Colorado, we have hearings, and the hearings are presided over by, like the one that's on, I think it's Monday evening, is the county commissioners sit up on this platform like they're the presiding judges, and they listen to our testimony. And right now, our testimony is the majority of the people here have not liked having GMOs on public land. And so they continue to put GMOs on public land, against the majority of the wishes of Boulder County people. And so we're once again going to present to them why we don't want GMOs on our public land. And this time there are a group of us that are participating, and we're going to be talking about how this is a mockery of democracy. It's a sham. It's a fraud. They're not listening to us. They're just up there giving us the opportunity to speak out, but then they get to choose what we do. And in your community, you all sit there and vote, and then it becomes real.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, I would say to a great extent, I would term it as somewhat of a false sense of democracy, in that many communities feel that they're not empowered to pass these local laws, even with town meeting, because we are a state of preemption. We also have these corporate developers that are very keen on bullying communities, especially the selectmen, into not enforcing. I mean, because you can have a community rights Bill of Rights ordinance for your community,
right,
laying out this law declaring these things.
Yeah.
But if it's not being enforced, then in essence, what good is the law?
Right, exactly.
So when our town leaders, our selectmen, are intimidated and bullied, then that law kind of becomes not worth the paper that it's written on. And so then, which is specifically why it's within that local Bill of Rights to say that any community member can also enforce that local law, because it's understood that our leaders are going to succumb to some degree of pressure. They are the target. And so a local community member can also bring defense in the name of that ordinance.
Yeah.
So far in New Hampshire, we actually have not had any legal challenge to any, not directly, to any ordinance that has been enacted in the state. And that's a good thing. Typically what happens is that the developer looks at that, maybe that is tied in with the power of town meeting, and they understand that people believe they have this democracy available to them, and they take it very seriously, and they do. And so most of the time the developers walk.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Say that it's not to say that more and more communities are not finding themselves target for these projects, and that's really what has pushed communities to come together under the New Hampshire Community Rights Network and draft language for a constitutional amendment,
right,
and then step forward and pursue that and propose it to the legislature.
Yes, and that's very important. And I want to go back and just define a term that you used, and that you said that New Hampshire is a preemption state.
Yes.
So we need to explain what this principle is right now, because it's really important right now.
Usually what I tell people when I get that question is that think of it as, to define preemption in New Hampshire, a community, a town, a municipality is only legally allowed to do whatever the state writes a statute empowering them to do.
Right.
That comes from what we call Dillon's rule, which is that theory that the state is the parent, the municipality is the child. And so therefore the state dictates to the municipality what they can and cannot do.
Right.
Versus, and I'll define that, clarify that from a home rule state, which then says that a municipality is entitled to do or pass a law at the local level so long as it's not prohibited at the state level. It's a different perspective.
Right. Yeah. It has to do with the term as long as it does not oppose state interest, okay,
Yes.
or within the interest of the state, which is completely ambiguous because anything could become a state interest. So
Especially commerce.
yeah, anything that has to do with commerce, pretty much. And so what I wanted to just explain is that preemption is used in Colorado. It's used to make local fracking bans illegal, and it's used to overturn any efforts to create a higher minimum wage, a local wage which is higher than the state mandated minimum wage. All right. Telluride, Colorado tried to do that. They tried to enact a minimum wage so that people wouldn't be impoverished in their area, and it was preempted by the state of Colorado. All right. So what a preemption is a judicial decision. A judge will decide, well, I'm sorry, you don't have the authority to do this. It's a state matter. Yeah. So what you've done in New Hampshire is parallel to what we've done here in Colorado, where we are our amendment process is different from yours. Our amendment process is that we have what's called initiative. We can amend our state constitution by writing our law, our amendment, submitting it to a whole series of reviews, and then usually a legal challenge at the Supreme Court level by, right now, I believe it's the Petroleum Institute. And so then it gets through, and then you have a certain amount of time, which is usually limited by all these state challenges, to gather 150,000 signatures. And the signature gathering is very, very time consuming and dependent upon our ability to recruit petitioners at a time when we don't even have an approved petition. So it's a very hard thing to recruit someone to do something when we don't really have anything for them to do yet. The only amendments that have been made here in Colorado, as far as we know, have had sponsors with deep pockets who've paid $250,000 or so to hire professional petitioners to go out and do their work for them. And so in your state, it's a different matter. And can you go over your process?
Yes, New Hampshire is a legislative process, and so we have to seek a legislator that is willing to sponsor a proposed piece of legislation, and that means putting it forth to our general court, which is made up of the House and the Senate. That process also includes they have to approve it, but it's 3/5 of the House has to approve it and 3/5 of the Senate must approve it before it then gets put on the ballot, which then means 2/3 of a majority of the registered voters, qualified voters, would then have to approve it in order for it to actually take effect and ratify our Constitution. So, or ratify the amendment to the Constitution. So not an easy process. New Hampshire, I've heard it said that 96% of the lobbyists in New Hampshire are corporate paid lobbyists.
Right.
So that leaves, 4%. And that's actually, maybe a nonprofit organization that might be putting something forward that is in the best interest of the people. And so in approaching our legislators, we have 424 total representatives in New Hampshire. 24 of them are senators, the rest are House representatives. That's a lot of people to
Right.
have to reach out to. And our House reps do not have offices. They do not have phone numbers down in Concord. So you're dealing with a state issued email address that they may or may not check. If you're lucky to get a personal email address, that's better because then they might actually see your email. And you're dealing with their personal home phone numbers. Senators are different. They have offices in Concord. And so most of anything that gets done in Concord in New Hampshire is done through the Senate. Much easier to access 24 people. And if you can persuade those 24 people, then you are more likely to get something put through, which of course means that the corporate lobbyists have that game plan down pat.
Right. Yeah. They've been doing this for 200 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very obvious that they are successful.
Yeah, and
But
they're also, from my experience doing testimony at the state hearings, is that they're all friends with all the elected officials that are sitting in those hearings.
yeah, it is interesting. But I mean, what we're seeing in New Hampshire and other places is really a growing people's movement.
Right.
I mean, and one of the things that we talk about with this particular amendment, we call it the New Hampshire Community Rights Amendment, is that this is a people's amendment. This
Right.
wasn't something drafted by, a single legislator. This is not something that was drafted by a corporate entity that's seeking to put forth some kind of project and financially benefit from it. So it's a great to see that kind of solidarity amongst the people. And when we talked earlier about the various projects and issues, it really takes, I guess, a common ground
Right.
amongst people. Because as you stated, in Colorado, you have a lot of fracking going on. And so that renewable green energy looks pretty good.
Right.
It sounds good when you hear the propaganda. In New Hampshire, we have all these varying issues going on, but there's still those same mindsets. You have people from the Northern Pass Project that look at the fracked gas pipeline and think, well, we need some form of energy. We don't want this, so why not that?
Yeah.
And you have people from, the Kinder Morgan project with the pipeline that are looking up at Northern Pass people saying, you got to be kidding me. You're not living in the incineration zone. What are you upset about? Um, there's a lot of mindsets that play a part in this. And it's great to see people coming together under that common denominator of understanding that it's a democracy problem. And
Right.
it's about the community's rights to self-govern more than just whether you support or don't support one particular issue.
Yeah, I think that's really evident in the work that we're doing, and people really need to know this, and that is that all of these separate issues, and I've been listening to activists, and I've been interested in the environment and human rights, and forever, and there are so many issues, so many separate issues. I mean, it was always like the whales and the no nukes and the Vietnam War when I was growing up, but it's been wolves and saving a river and saving and blowing up a dam and I don't know. It just goes on and on. The list goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. And so if we have all these organizations that are opposing each one of these issues, then we're spread so thin that we just don't have enough people to do the work on the separate issue, and we don't have enough money to work on the separate issue. And so then what happens is that we end up being diluted and diffused, and we never get anything done. And that the environment sort of shows that now. I mean, things haven't gotten better with all this environmental activism and reform that's been going on. It's gotten hugely worse.
Well, this is a very common tactic with these, corporate entities, is that divide the opposition.
Right.
I mean, all of these communities are opposed to having their rights violated.
Yeah.
All of these communities are opposed to whatever particular environmental harm might be directly affecting their community, or whatever health issue that could be a result. So all the communities are united in that. But the developers have a way of kind of dividing the opposition by pitting one issue against another.
Right.
And as you said, you now have, save the wolves, save the whales, save the this, the that. And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, which equals a lot of money. And people don't have those kind of resources. So it's been a 10-year endeavor, that I was not part of laying that groundwork, but I was a colleague of Gail's for 2 years before taking on this responsibility and I don't know, maybe this endeavor, to bring people together under this foundation that she laid in this state. And that is, it is our right to decide. Communities should have a recognized right to decide what happens in their communities. It should not be up to our governments that are bought and paid for, or
Right.
the industries that obviously are being, driven by profit. And it's fine for them to profit. We understand that that's the nature of the beast. Nobody is looking to just, remove all corporate rights to profit or any of their other rights. But when they step over that line of harming communities and affecting our health, safety, and our welfare, our inalienable right to access water, clean air, soil that's uncontaminated, these things that are the basis of our very existence and survival, that it's crossed the line. That just,
Right.
when you put it in those terms, I think most people look at it and go, wow, I didn't know that they could do that. Well, yes, they can.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
well, yeah, I was shocked by all this myself. I mean, the the thing that I'm concerned about is that everyone find out about what we're doing here. And so the thing is that we've got this strategy that allows us to have an analysis of a problem that is the kind of the fundamental problem that's common with all of these issues, right? We're identifying the fact that communities don't have the right to enact local laws to protect their own health, safety, and welfare. All right, so that if we did that, we would be able to say, oh, well, we do want this kind of energy because it really is the best for us, but we don't want this other one. All right, and if we right now, if we say, well, we don't want this other one, basically making that decision for us is illegal here in Colorado. You know, we can't make that. They say it's not your domain. This is a state issue. We have a state statute. The Colorado Oil and Gas Act was put in place to regulate oil and gas development and transportation and everything else. And so anything that you would try and do on the local level is not legal. So
Mm-hmm.
basically what they're saying is that your democracy is illegal. You know, what you want doesn't matter in all of these state issue related things. And so what has happened here is, like in Lafayette, the Community Bill of Rights was passed. 1 month later, the Colorado Oil and Gas Association sued Lafayette for enacting that fracking ban in their Community Bill of Rights. So we've had the experience of preemption in action here in Colorado, and that's why we're working on our state amendment to protect our local communities so that they can enact local laws that are rights-based. In other words, they are the enumeration and clarification of rights that are owned legally by the communities, and that we can prohibit harmful corporate practices without the threat of being preempted by the state. That we have that right. It's written right in our Constitution. We shouldn't really have to say this, but you know, it's being ignored right now. All of our rights are pretty much being ignored. So what we're doing is we want to have our organizing be rights-based, and that's why we call this rights-based organizing, because it's fundamental. It's not Save the Wolves organizing, or here in Colorado there are a lot of people who are doing Fight the Fracking organizing. It's, let's organize to claim our rights and to protect those and to advance them. And so that's what we're doing. So our amendment basically is a way of nullifying state preemption and other corporate power that's forced on communities to get them to become subservient to some particular corporate harm. Would you be interested in going over the language of your state amendment right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
Now, I have it up on my screen so I can read it if it helps you. Do you have it there handy?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Do you want me to read through it, or do you want to just talk about what, like a synopsis?
No, I think we should go through it because obviously we have people listening to you now from out of state, right? But this is really for your people there in New Hampshire to hear, because this is, to me, really, really sacred language, and I like every word of this amendment that you're proposing there in New Hampshire. So
Okay.
All I want to hear is like the substance of it, not all of the technical language. Can you begin with all government of right originates from the people?
Yes. So this would be adding Article 40, right of local community self-government, to the first part of the New Hampshire state constitution, which is our Bill of Rights.
Right.
All government of right originates from the people, is founded in their consent, and instituted for the general good. The people have the right and the duty to reform governments when those governments manifestly endanger public liberty.
Good, right there. Yeah. So it isn't just a right, but a duty.
Absolutely. Yeah. New Hampshire has, I don't know if Colorado has this, but we actually have an amendment in our, a Bill of Rights, Article 10, that is called the right of revolution.
Right.
And so this is about our right to abolish, change, reform. What are some of the other words here? To reform the old or establish a new government.
Right.
So this is within our Constitution.
Right. We have that. I think it's like, I don't know, Article 2 of the Vestment of Power Bill of Rights section of our state constitution. Yeah. It's profound stuff. It's right there. And this is the language of the Declaration of Independence. Fortunately, when many states got established here in this country, it was actually required by the federal government that language be used in forming the state constitutions. It must have been some incredibly enlightened moment there. And so the founders of Colorado, that's what we have too. So what we're doing is saying that we have rights. And we have a duty to have our government uphold those rights and to do away with anything that interferes with those rights. Can you read the next part? And sustainable.
Yes. So, and sustainable environmental and economic development can only be achieved when the people affected by governing decisions are the ones who make them.
Yeah.
So we talked about this earlier.
Yeah. And let's just go over that once more. And that is that what it's really pointing to is the authority. Who has the authority to make these decisions? Who is the authority on the quality of your life as an individual? Who is the authority? You are, right?
Exactly.
Who's the best authority? You. Okay. And then when we talk about our community rights, we're talking about the collection of individual rights, where we've all agreed that we have a right to clean air and clean water. We've all agreed on that.
Right. But somehow when you talk about community rights, all of a sudden that becomes very threatening.
Yeah.
It's like, so there's a mindset that, okay, we can acknowledge and recognize individual rights, but there's a piece that seems to intimidate the powers that be when we start talking about collective rights. And so that's exactly what this is about, establishing is collective rights.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it sounds like that we're assuming power, doesn't it? Like that, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that we're yeah. So
However, I mean, power that we've already been, I mean, it's inherent in inalienable. I mean, it's already there. Most people, I think, have forgotten about it.
right, yeah, yeah. Let's go on then, and then the next part of it. Therefore,
Therefore, the people of New Hampshire have an inherent and inalienable right of local community self-government in each county, municipality, city, and town.
good. Yeah,
So that, I mean, that first part in essence is talking about specifically recognizing the right of local community self-government. That's not specifically recognized in the Bill of Rights of our Constitution. And so we feel that because it appears quite obviously that is not being respected, even though we understand that it existed long before the revolution, it existed after the revolution. This mindset, this was all the basis of the foundation of our nation. If you go back to colonial times,
right.
it was taken for granted. Nobody thought anything of it. It's just the way it was. And so it's not anything new, not anything new at all.
Well, actually, that violation of the right to local community self-government by the King of England and his corporations was the whole reason for the American Revolution in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
All
So
right.
that first part is really establishing and stating the recognition of the right to local community self-government.
Yeah, and the next part is about our right to have our to establish in law our local community bills of rights. Can you read that part?
So that right shall include, and we're referring to the right of local community self-government, the power of the people and of their governments to enact local laws that protect health, safety, and welfare by recognizing or establishing rights of natural persons, their local communities, and nature, and securing those rights using prohibitions and other means deemed necessary by the community, including measures to establish, define, alter, or eliminate competing rights, powers and privileges, immunities, or duties of corporations and other business entities operating or seeking to operate in the community.
Right. Yeah. So that's pretty clear.
It is pretty clear. It's really about securing the right of local community self-government, because if you cannot take action on your right of local community self-government, take action on the decision that the community made to protect their health, safety, and welfare, then in essence, you don't have the right of local community self-government, which is what we've talked about. You're denied the authority to really do anything about it.
Right.
And this is securing the authority, allowing us to put action to it by prohibiting activities that violate those rights,
Yes.
which are currently not recognized under state law.
Yeah, and those prohibitions could be things like water extraction or fracking or whatever. You could do prohibitions on that, and then your community's health, safety, and welfare would be protected. There's also another factor, and that has to do with, say, for instance, here in Boulder, Colorado, it's illegal for us to have any other real municipal energy than that which is offered by the state mandated monopoly energy company, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we tried to create a public utility and the state ruled against it for some technical reasons, So if we were to say that we don't like you burning coal and we don't like you doing this, that, and the other thing to raise it to generate energy, we want to create our own utility, which is a positive step toward making our community more sustainable. That's illegal in the state's eyes. Well, this amendment would defend the community's right to establish their own local power utility.
Yeah, it basically empowers them to do so it empowers them with the authority to do so. Absolutely.
Exactly. So it's not just reactive; it's a proactive thing also.
Yes. Yeah.
Now I'm interested in this next part, so let's go through it.
All right. So what we consider the third part of our amendment is local laws adopted pursuant to this article shall not be subject to preemption or nullification by international law, federal law, or state law if such local laws do not restrict fundamental rights of natural persons, their local communities, or nature secured by local, state, or federal constitutions or by international law. And if such local laws do not weaken protections for natural persons, their local communities, or nature provided by state, federal, or international law. So long as a local law is not enacted to restrict or weaken an existing fundamental right that's already recognized, then it would be pursuant to the article.
Right.
So I've had many conversations with many representatives, and I've heard everything from, well, this just means every community is going to have their own law, and they're all going to be different, and all these communities are just going to go rogue and do anything and everything that they want. Well, no. And what's funny about that particular, I'll call it an accusation because that's how they see it, is that we already have different laws from community to community. This already exists, whether it be local zoning regulations and whatnot. I mean, you can have different weight limits on roads. The municipalities are responsible for certain things within a community, and they can pass different laws regarding what they are responsible for. So we are already responsible for knowing when you go into a community, let's say you want to build something, you've got to find out what the law is, the local ordinance for that community pertaining to what action you want to take. No different. So what this does is this is saying that if a community, let's say, wanted to ban bearing arms, saying, well, we think, for our own health, safety, and welfare, nobody should be able to have the right to bear arms. No, you cannot do that. That's not something that would be pursuant to this amendment because it's restricting or weakening an existing fundamental right. You have the right to bear arms.
Right.
So it can't be used just to eliminate all state law. It cannot be used to eliminate all preemption under any and all circumstances. And it cannot be used to nullify civil, human, fundamental rights.
Exactly. And what it does is it establishes the floor for rights, for rights
Versus now we have a ceiling.
Now what we're doing is we're raising the ceiling. We're raising the ceiling, that's all. We're not losing any rights that we already have.
Yeah. And I would say, like, it actually eliminates the ceiling. Right now, what we have is a ceiling,
which is the floor.
We're being told that we can't determine our own rights. That's all kind of being dictated for us.
Right.
And so this is about saying, no, this is the beginning. These are fundamental basic rights, and this is where we begin. And the amendment is about being able to expand and protect those rights,
right? Not
to set a ceiling limit to keep you, restrained within a definition of those rights.
Yeah, we're basically saying that those rights already exist. They're inalienable. They're not given to us by law.
Right.
They come to us as they exist. They don't even come to us. They are there as a term of our existence.
Exactly.
And so they're there already. All we want to have is our legal system be based on that instead of the protection of private property and commerce, which is the way it is now. Mm-hmm. And so human rights, community rights, inalienable rights are trampled, violated severely by a constitution and a system of law that values property and commerce over inalienable rights. We're trying to flip that.
Yes, exactly. And yet those rights really supersede by far the rights of corporate entities. It's when you talk about statutory law,
right?
Our constitutional rights are above those, statutory law. So it's interesting how statutory law has been used to suppress our constitutional rights.
Yes, I know. It's very ironic, but that's the way things are. And if we don't start doing something about this by exposing these contradictions and creating our own laws and having them challenged in court and get more and more people educated and more people involved in community rights organizing, I mean, this is what we can do, and this is the historic necessity. This is the need of our time. If we don't do this, the other option is that the entire everything, including the air we breathe and the water we drink, will be, the standards will all be determined by a central government, and then typically the corporations will spoil all that and then sell us back what they've spoiled. So in other words, they'll sell us clean air and clean water at a premium price after they've spoiled it. So that's
Yeah.
typical scenario, So so this is what we have to do, and this is how we go about it. What else do we have here? You read the whole thing, great. So if anyone has any questions about this amendment, it would like to get involved in promoting this amendment, would like to donate, would like to, organize in their own community where an existing community rights organization does not exist, how can they get a hold of you there in New Hampshire?
They can get a hold of me through email.
Yeah.
That email is Michelle, Michelle, at celdf.org.
Yeah, and that stands for Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund.
Yes. If they're interested in making a donation or finding out more about the New Hampshire Community Rights Network, they can visit the website at nhcommunityrights.org. Community rights is spelled out. NH is not. New Hampshire is not. So nhcommunityrights.org. And they can also, there's a donate link there, of course. So a donation can be made through the website. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So that donation would be tax deductible. And they can also email the New Hampshire Community Rights Network at info@nhcommunityrights.org.
Great.
So,
Yeah.
New Hampshire Community Rights Network partners with SelfGovernment to put on what we call community rights awareness workshops. So anyone who's interested in hosting a workshop in your area will come to you. And I would say, it's a great opportunity to learn more about this process at the local level, and also to understand more what this means at the state level with the proposed New Hampshire Community Rights Amendment.
Good. Yeah. And, there's a lot of things that can be done still in local communities around New Hampshire. And that's how people get started. Here in Colorado, we do the same thing. We call it the Community Rights Forum. Mm-hmm. And a community requests us to come out and give a presentation. And we do. We give a presentation to groups and organizations or just the general public in a community and explain, the history of community rights organizing here in Colorado and nationwide. Yes. And then a lot of times what will happen is we then have what we call the democracy school. And the people in the local areas can sponsor one of these things, or they can come to one that's being offered by us for the state of Colorado. I'm sure you have those there in New Hampshire also.
Absolutely, and we highly recommend that you go at least once to a democracy school, because it is a tremendously in-depth opportunity to understand really the history of our system of government, where it came from, why it is the way it is, and I would highly recommend it. It's life-changing.
It certainly changed my life. I know I've taken it 4 times, and I know the last time it was offered here, I was really disappointed that I had some other engagement that I needed to attend, and so I missed it. But I have loved going through my democracy school textbook. I mean, you get a huge textbook. I think it's about this thick. I forget how many pages it is, but it's full of the story of the kind of the history of the people, and about why the whys and the how tos of community rights organizing. It's really powerful, and this would be something that I just can't I can't speak enough about it, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is amazing. So, is there anything else you'd like to offer as a parting idea or comment?
Well, it's preparing for a marathon, not a sprint, as Gail Darrell often said. And it's about focusing on what matters to you as a community at the local level, and then taking all of those communities within a state and bringing that forth as to what matters to you as a state at the state level.
Right.
And then in turn, as more communities do that within their state and more states do that, then it's really going to become a national movement, which we're already beginning to see.
Yeah.
So it's an exciting, people's movement. It really is. And it only takes a handful of people to make a tremendous amount of change. And we're the ones that we've been waiting for. Nobody else is going to do it. If you're inspired to do something, people will follow you. They just will.
Yeah,
so
it's happening. It's happening.
It is happening. I encourage people, don't hesitate. Don't think it's too much, or oh, you can't do this, or any of those kinds of self-defeating thoughts, because they don't produce anything except self-defeat. So
a lot of these little tiny communities get together. There's like 5 people that started the whole community rights movement in Lafayette, Colorado, and are really the founders of the state organization now. And they got together and they figured out that they were going to get fracked if they didn't do something about it, and they went through all the different options for how to organize against fracking, and they chose, fortunately they chose community rights organizing. Yeah. And so any community, if you have some factory farm that's trying to come in and put in a giant animal confinement operation in your area, I mean, we have there are all the stories about the people who get sick from breathing those fumes, and the terrible bacterial contamination that occurs from the exhaust being blown out of those buildings into the local neighborhoods. That exhaust kills animals and sickens the population. Anything. That human sludge spreading is a big deal for me, because it's, the name of the democracy school is the Daniel Pembroke Democracy School. And Daniel was killed from that human sludge spreading. And yeah. So,
well, it really boils down to helping people to realize that you are legally being sickened, you are legally being murdered. This is legal killing, is what's really going on. Right. If you want to talk very frankly about it, and that's being permitted by state governments, and federal governments. It's not okay.
Right.
And I think the average person has that understanding and feels compelled that it's wrong. So what we hope to do is to bring in a method of which to be able to carry out how to change that wrong, how to correct the redress, the wrong that's being done. Sorry about that choice of word there. To redress the wrong. And there is a way to do that. And when people join together, the power is tremendous.
Right.
It's something that I think people need to be encouraged. They need to hear that you can do this. It is possible. It's been done before. When we talk about the suffrage movement, when we talk about abolitionist movement, I mean, these movements have affected real change before. That doesn't happen just by walking in and changing, let's say, the Constitution out of nowhere. That happened from the ground up,
Right.
grassroots organizing pushed upwards to create significant, broad-reaching change. I don't see this movement as being any different.
Yeah, in fact, some of us feel like it's the only real movement that's occurred. Uh, Maybe you could say that the gay rights movement has accomplished in recent times what these other movements had accomplished. But the definition of a movement is, really by nature, an organization of people that create structural change. And a lot of our quote misunderstandings of quote movements have to do with just protesting and lobbying and begging and pleading with our government and just talking about how harmful the particular single issue really is. But then when it comes to creating structural change, in some cases, these big green organizations are actually opposed to doing structural change. They are just totally content with, protesting and lobbying and begging for better particles per million, or something like that.
Yeah.
So this is a fundamental shift in a paradigm of activism, and it's all about grassroots.
Yeah.
It's just magnificent.
I tell local communities, I'm like, feel free to go waste your time and your energy, with that regulatory process, because it's been proven. Well, we're talking a couple centuries now. It's just been proven over and over to not be effective in the sense of, as you stated, affecting any real change. It doesn't cause any structural difference. The end result is the same as what we've had from the beginning with the railroads.
Yeah.
Like you said, feel free to go and protest. Feel free to, raise your money and wear your costumes and create your signs and go out there.
And
Um,
send in your online petitions to your,
right.
and contact your elected representatives and all that
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
And I mean, and all that's part of the process for sure. We understand that there's a certain element of that is involved in the organizing. But when that's as far as it goes, all it does is stroke your ego, you know? So you feel like you've done something. People feel good about what they think that they've accomplished, and really nothing has been accomplished. At the end of the day, nothing has structurally changed.
Right.
So sometimes it takes communities a bit of time to
Yeah.
realize that, to come to that within themselves. But it's important, I think, for communities to have that experience, so that they
Yeah.
can see the difference.
Well,
Sometimes they don't have that experience. They don't understand the difference between the traditional activism and community rights
yeah. Once you've
organizing.
been through the regulatory process, I mean, if your community has done that, anyone out there listening, if your community has gone through the regulatory process and then been denied, uh, the in court, or your officials have denied you at the end, and you've followed all the stuff you're supposed to do. You hired a lawyer, you signed up with an environmental group, you protested and lobbied and signed petitions and showed up where you were supposed to show up and did everything you were supposed to do, and then you lost. Don't give up. Don't despair. Don't allow that to discourage you and cause you to stop with what you're doing, because that's what it's all set up to do. It's all
Mhm.
set up to beat you down and wear you out and put you in a position where you're ready to submit to whatever harm is coming your way. So many communities have to go through that process and then try this community rights organizing as a last resort. Hopefully it won't be too late for you by the time you go through all of this. But we're here for you. You
Yeah.
can see that Michelle's ready to go anytime you are, and we're the same way in Colorado, and we have 6 states now that are well organized and ready to help any way we can. So get a hold of, if you're in New Hampshire, get a hold of Michelle and get involved in the community rights movement. Educate yourself. And here in Colorado, of course, we need all your help we can get. So, so thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us and allowing us to pick your brain about what's going on in New Hampshire and to help us get a grasp on the topic of community rights organizing.
Well, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.